Mental toughness is not built by talking. It is not built by motivation. And it is not built by proving anything to anyone. Mental toughness is built in silence, when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when no one cares. The strongest people are not loud. They do not explain themselves. They do not react emotionally. They endure quietly. They train privately. And they move without announcing it. If you are tired of feeling reactive, distracted, and emotionally exposed, this audiobook will teach you how to build unshakable mental strength, silently. Stop announcing your strength. Real strength does not need witnesses. Weak minds announce. Strong minds move. Most people don't fail because they are incapable. They fail because they talk too much. They announce their goals, they announce their plans, they announce their new mindset, and in doing so, they drain the very power they need to succeed. Silence preserves power. Noise leaks it. That's the truth most people don't want to hear. When you talk about what you're going to do, your brain rewards you as if you already did it. You feel productive without producing. You feel strong without becoming strong. That's dangerous. You tell someone, "I'm getting disciplined." Your mind relaxes. The urgency drops. The hunger fades. Because part of you believes the job is already done. But nothing has been done. You have a choice. You can speak for approval, or you can act for results. Most people choose approval. They want encouragement. They want validation. They want someone to clap before the work begins. But strength does not grow in applause. Strength grows in isolation. That's the key. Every time you announce your goals, you outsource your confidence. You depend on reactions, on opinions, on feedback. And the moment someone doubts you, your motivation collapses. That's why disciplined people are quiet. They don't need permission. They don't need belief from others. They don't need an audience. You don't need their permission. Look at your past. How many times did you tell people what you were going to do and then quietly stop? Not because you couldn't do it, but because once you spoke it, the pressure disappeared. Talking feels like progress, but it's a lie. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Discipline is private. Discipline is boring. Discipline is silent. That's why most people avoid it. They would rather talk about discipline than live it. They post quotes, they share videos, they repeat phrases, but when it's time to wake up early, to say no, to endure discomfort, they vanish, because they already spent their energy on words. Silence preserves power. Noise leaks it. This isn't about becoming secretive. It's about becoming serious. When you stop announcing your strength, something shifts. Your actions become heavier. Your decisions become deliberate. Your focus sharpens. You move differently, because now there is no backup plan of praise, only execution. You have a choice. Either tell people what you plan to do, or show them what you did. Not both. Real strength doesn't explain itself, it proves itself. Think about the most disciplined people you know. They don't talk much, they don't advertise their struggle, they don't seek reassurance. They just show up, every day, consistently. And when results appear, people say, "Wow, you changed." But the change didn't happen publicly, it happened in silence. That's why silence feels uncomfortable at first. Because it removes the dopamine of validation and replaces it with responsibility. No one is watching, no one is cheering, only you. And that's exactly where strength is built. That's the key. If you need someone to know you're strong, you're not strong yet. If you need approval to stay disciplined, you're not disciplined yet. If you need to explain your plan, you're not ready. Strength speaks through results, not promises. Let me be clear. This is not about hiding. This is about focusing. When you speak less, you observe more. When you observe more, you improve faster. When you remove outside noise, your inner voice becomes clear. And that voice doesn't lie. It tells you when you're lazy, when you're making excuses, when you're avoiding discomfort. That honesty is painful. That's why people drown it with noise. They scroll, they talk, they announce. But disciplined people do the opposite. They reduce input, they reduce speech, they reduce distractions, and they increase output. It's not about attention, it's about execution. Here's the rule you need to adopt. If it matters, keep it quiet. If it's real, protect it. If it's powerful, don't announce it. Work in silence until the work speaks for you. You don't need to tell people you're changing your life. You need to change your life. You don't need to announce discipline. You need to practice it. You don't need validation. You need consistency. You have a choice. The next time you feel the urge to tell someone your plan, pause. Ask yourself, am I seeking encouragement or avoiding the work? If you were truly committed, you wouldn't need to speak, because commitment is quiet. Commitment doesn't negotiate. Commitment doesn't perform. Commitment acts. And the more silent your discipline becomes, the louder your results will be. Silence preserves power. Noise leaks it. Master this, and everything changes. But silence alone isn't enough, because once you stop announcing your strength, you'll face something far more dangerous: your own excuses. You've learned to stop talking. Now you must learn to stop justifying. You mastered restraint. Now it's time to master accountability. Chapter 2. Emotional control is the foundation of toughness. Reactivity is the enemy of discipline. Calm is the first form of dominance. If you miss this chapter, you miss the entire book. Because mental toughness does not start with motivation. It does not start with ambition. It starts with emotional control. If you cannot control how you react, you do not control your life. That's the key. Every weak moment you've had, every regret, every setback, every mistake traces back to one thing: emotional reaction without discipline. You reacted instead of responding. You exploded instead of pausing. You spoke when silence would have protected you. And every time the cost was the same: loss of control, loss of power, loss of respect, especially self-respect. You have a choice. You can continue living reactively, letting emotions decide your actions. Or you can build toughness by mastering calm. Because calm is not passive. Calm is power under control. Emotion itself is not the enemy. Lack of control is. Anger is not weakness. Fear is not weakness. Frustration is not weakness. Uncontrolled emotion is weakness. Mentally tough people feel everything. They just don't let feelings drive. They pause, they breathe, they observe, then they act. That pause, that space between stimulus and response is where discipline lives. That's where power lives. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need their approval to stay calm. You don't need to react just because something provoked you. You have a choice, and every time you choose calm over chaos, you reinforce mental toughness. Most people think toughness means aggression. They think it means dominance through volume. They think it means reacting fast and hard. That's false. Real toughness is restraint. The strongest people in the room don't rush to speak. They don't rush to defend themselves. They don't rush to explain. They wait, because they know something most people don't. Reactions give away control. Calm takes it back. That's the key. Look at your own life honestly. How many times did emotions sabotage you? You sent a message you shouldn't have sent. You said something you couldn't take back. You made a decision in anger, fear, or ego. And later, when the emotion faded, the damage remained. Mental toughness is the ability to delay reaction until clarity returns. Control yourself first. Everything else follows. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. If someone can trigger you emotionally, they control you. If words can derail your focus, you're not disciplined. If criticism breaks your rhythm, you're not tough yet. If silence from others creates anxiety, you're dependent, and dependence is weakness. Not because emotions are bad, but because uncontrolled emotion makes you predictable, and predictable people are easy to manipulate. You have a choice. Either you let emotions pull your strings, or you learn to sit with them without moving. That's discipline. Mentally tough people train emotional control deliberately. They don't wait for life to test them. They practice calm daily. When frustration rises, they don't escape it. They stay present. When anger appears, they don't justify it. They observe it. When fear shows up, they don't panic. They breathe and ground themselves. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about containing it. That's the difference. Suppression leads to explosion later. Control leads to strength now. Control yourself first. Everything else follows. Here is a practical discipline you must start today. When emotion spikes, do nothing. Not for 5 seconds, not for 10, for 60. 1 full minute of stillness. No talking, no texting, no decision. Just breathing and awareness. This breaks the automatic reaction loop. This trains the nervous system. This is how you build toughness silently. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need to explain why you're calm. You don't need to justify restraint. You have a choice. Understand this clearly. Every disciplined life is built on delayed reaction. Every successful person learned to sit with discomfort without acting impulsively. That's not talent. That's training. Calm is trained. Control is trained. Toughness is trained. And training happens in moments no one sees. The world will try to rush you. Social media rewards instant reaction. People provoke attention. Situations pressure you to respond immediately. Resist it. Urgency is often artificial. Emotion is often exaggerated. Silence is often the strongest answer. You don't win by reacting faster. You win by reacting better. That's the key. Let's be direct. If you cannot control your emotions, discipline will never stick. You can build routines, you can set goals, you can listen to audiobooks, but without emotional control, everything collapses under pressure. Discipline is fragile without calm. That's why this chapter matters, because emotional control is not optional, it's fundamental. Control yourself first, everything else follows. Here's what mentally tough people stop doing. They stop explaining their emotions. They stop defending every feeling. They stop blaming circumstances for reactions. Instead, they take responsibility. They say, I reacted, I'll do better next time. No drama, no excuses. That's toughness. You don't need their permission to grow up emotionally. You don't need validation to mature. You just need discipline. The more calm you become, the less chaos affects you. The less chaos affects you, the clearer your thinking becomes. The clearer your thinking becomes, the better your decisions get. And better decisions compound. That's how lives change quietly. Most people try to control the world. Mentally tough people control themselves. That's the difference. You can't control what happens. You can't control what others say. You can't control outcomes fully, but you can always control your response. You have a choice, every single time. This chapter is not about being emotionless, it's about being unshakable. It's not about being cold, it's about being stable. And stability is rare. That's why it's powerful. As you move forward, remember this. The moment you feel emotional urgency, stop. The moment you feel triggered, pause. The moment you want to react, breathe. Control yourself first. Everything else follows.
You've learned to slow down your reactions. Now it's time to address where most people lose their power completely. Validation, attention, approval. You mastered emotional control. Now let's talk about the silent cost of seeking validation.
Chapter 3. Quiet work outlasts loud motivation. Motivation is loud. It speaks in excitement. It announces plans. It promises change tomorrow. But motivation does not last. That's the truth most people refuse to accept. Motivation fades when things get boring. It disappears when results slow down. It vanishes the moment discomfort shows up. And that is why most people never change. They rely on motivation instead of structure. They chase feelings instead of building systems. They wait to feel ready instead of showing up anyway. You have a choice. You can live motivated or you can live disciplined. And discipline does not need noise. Quiet work outlasts loud motivation. Every time. Motivation wants attention. It wants excitement. It wants to be seen. Quiet work wants consistency. It wants repetition. It wants time. That's the key. Loud effort seeks recognition. Quiet effort compounds results. Most people talk about what they are doing. Strong people focus on doing it again tomorrow. The gym doesn't care how inspired you feel. Your bank account doesn't care how excited you were. Your future doesn't respond to speeches. It responds to repetition. What you repeat quietly becomes who you are. Say that again. What you repeat quietly becomes who you are. Motivation is emotional. Systems are mechanical. Motivation depends on mood. Systems operate regardless of how you feel. That's why systems win. When you rely on motivation, you work when you feel like it. When you rely on systems, you work because it's scheduled. When motivation fades, the system stays. You don't need to feel inspired to brush your teeth. You don't negotiate whether to show up to work. You don't wait for excitement to eat or sleep. Why? Because those actions are systems, not emotions. And the same must be true for your growth. You don't rise by feeling more, you rise by repeating more. Look around. People who post the most about progress usually make the least. People who announce discipline usually lack it. People who need applause rarely last long. That's not an insult, it's a pattern. Noise creates pressure. Pressure creates burnout. Burnout kills consistency. Quiet work removes pressure. It removes performance. It removes the need to impress. That's why it lasts. What you repeat quietly becomes who you are. Here is the shift you must make. Stop asking, how motivated am I today? Start asking, what does the system require today? Motivation asks how you feel. Discipline asks what needs to be done. That's the key. Systems don't care about emotions, they care about execution. You don't need their permission to work quietly. You don't need validation to repeat the process. You don't need an audience to become strong. Most people quit because nobody is watching. The mentally tough continue because they are watching themselves. Let's make this practical. Quiet work looks boring from the outside. Same schedule, same habits, same routines. But inside, it is powerful, because repetition builds identity. You don't become disciplined by thinking about discipline. You become disciplined by repeating disciplined actions, daily, silently, without negotiation. That's how transformation happens, not in moments, in systems. Motivation wants results fast. Systems accept slow progress. Motivation demands reward. Systems focus on process. This is where most people fail. They stop because results don't show up immediately. They quit because progress feels invisible. They leave because effort isn't celebrated. But quiet work doesn't ask for celebration. It compounds. One day becomes a week becomes a month becomes a standard, and standards shape identity. What you repeat quietly becomes who you are.
You must understand this. Your brain believes what you repeatedly do, not what you repeatedly say. You can say you are disciplined, you can talk about becoming better, you can plan endlessly, but your actions decide who you are. Quiet repetition trains the nervous system. It teaches your mind that action is non-negotiable. It removes emotional debate. That's real toughness. Here is the behavioral shift you must adopt. Stop celebrating motivation. Start protecting systems. Stop chasing inspiration. Start defending routines. Stop asking how you feel. Start doing what is scheduled. That's the key. A system is not exciting. A system is reliable, and reliability builds strength. Quiet work means fewer opinions, fewer updates, fewer explanations. You don't need to tell people what you're building. You need to build it. Talking creates an illusion. Repetition creates reality. You don't need their permission. You don't need their belief. You don't need their approval. You need consistency. Understand this clearly. Every time you rely on motivation, you give power to emotion. Every time you rely on systems, you reclaim control. Emotion is unstable. Systems are stable. That's why disciplined people appear calm. They are not fighting their feelings, they are following their structure. Quiet work removes drama. It replaces chaos with order, and order creates momentum. Now listen carefully. You will not feel motivated every day. That's normal. But disciplined systems don't require motivation. They require obedience. Not to others, to your own standards. That's the difference between people who talk about change and people who embody it. What you repeat quietly becomes who you are. Here is your challenge for this chapter. Choose one habit, one routine, one non-negotiable action, and do it quietly. No announcements, no updates, no explanations, just repetition. Daily, silently, relentlessly. Let the system do the work, because motivation will fail you, but systems will carry you forward. Quiet work outlasts loud motivation. And once you understand that, you stop chasing feelings and start building results. You've learned how to work without noise. Now it's time to understand what drains your power the fastest.
Chapter 4. Stop explaining yourself to people who don't matter. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Let that settle. You don't owe an explanation for your goals. You don't owe an explanation for your silence. You don't owe an explanation for your pace, your focus, or your direction. Yet most people live as if they do. They explain why they're tired. They explain why they're busy. They explain why they're changing. They explain why they said no. And every explanation does one thing. It drains authority. That's the truth. Explaining invites doubt. Explaining invites opinions. Explaining invites interference. And here's the hard truth most people don't want to hear. Explanation is a habit of insecurity. Strong minds do not explain. Weak minds argue intentions. You have a choice. You can either live from authority or from approval, and you cannot have both. The moment you explain yourself to someone who doesn't matter, you hand them power. Power over your decisions, power over your confidence, power over your emotional state. That's the key. When you explain, you are subconsciously asking for permission. Permission to rest, permission to grow, permission to change direction, permission to become someone new. You don't need their permission, and the strongest people understand this early. They move quietly, they act decisively, they let outcomes speak. They don't say, "I'm working on something big." They disappear and return changed. It's not about arrogance, it's about clarity. Explaining creates noise, silence creates momentum. Think about this. Every time you explain yourself, you slow yourself down. You rehearse your reasons instead of reinforcing your discipline. You justify instead of executing. That's not strength. That's hesitation wearing a mask. And hesitation is expensive. It costs time. It costs energy. It costs focus. That's why mentally tough people don't narrate their lives. They live them. Here's a rule you must adopt if you want mental toughness. If someone does not contribute to your future, they do not require your explanation. Read that again. If someone does not contribute to your future, they do not require your explanation. Not your coworkers, not a distant family, not casual friends, not observers. Results don't explain themselves, they reveal. Most people explain because they fear misunderstanding, they fear being judged, they fear being labeled, they fear being seen as selfish. But discipline doesn't negotiate with fear. Discipline acts. You don't need to be understood. You need to be consistent. You have a choice. You can keep explaining, or you can start building. That's the key. Here's what explaining really does psychologically. It weakens your internal authority. Every explanation trains your mind to seek external validation. You start measuring your choices based on reactions instead of results. That's dangerous because the world reacts emotionally. Discipline does not. And when you train yourself to explain, you train yourself to hesitate. Hesitation is where momentum dies. Let's make this practical. Here's what you stop doing immediately. Stop explaining why you're tired. Stop explaining why you're focused. Stop explaining why you said no. Stop explaining your schedule. Replace explanations with boundaries. Short, calm, final. No, I'm unavailable. I've made a decision. I'm focused right now. No emotion, no defense, no justification. That's strength. You don't need their permission. Say it again internally. You don't need their permission. Not to improve, not to withdraw, not to change habits, not to grow silently. Every time you explain, ask yourself this question. Does this person control my future? If the answer is no, stop talking. Silence preserves authority. Strong minds are comfortable being misunderstood because they understand something most people don't. Clarity comes after results, not before. People only understand you when it's already obvious. Before that, they doubted. And that's fine. Doubt doesn't hurt discipline. Explanation does. Here's another hard truth. Explaining trains weakness into your identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who needs approval, someone who must defend choices, someone who must be liked. But discipline doesn't seek to be liked. Discipline seeks consistency, and consistency builds power, quietly. This chapter is not about becoming cold, it's about becoming grounded. There's a difference. Cold people shut down. Grounded people stay centered. They don't react. They don't defend. They don't explain. They act. That's mental toughness. Let me repeat this, because repetition builds belief. Explanation is a habit of insecurity. Confidence does not explain. Strength does not argue. Discipline does not defend itself. It moves. You have a choice. Explain your intentions or execute your discipline. Explain your boundaries or enforce them silently. Explain your growth or let it show. That's the key. And here's the final truth you must carry forward. Every unnecessary explanation is emotional leakage. It drains energy that should be invested in action. So guard your energy. Speak less, decide faster, move quietly. Because mental toughness isn't built by convincing others, it's built by controlling yourself. You've learned to stop explaining. Now you're ready for the next level. Because once you stop explaining, you begin to feel discomfort. Silence creates space, and space reveals resistance. You mastered authority. Now let's talk about endurance.
Chapter 5. Discomfort is the training ground. Discomfort is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Most people spend their entire lives running from discomfort. They run from boredom. They run from pain. They run from silence. They run from effort that doesn't immediately reward them. And then they wonder why they feel weak. Here is the truth you need to hear, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Discomfort is not danger. It is discipline. Say that again. Discomfort is not danger. It is discipline. The moment you feel uncomfortable is the moment training begins. Not physical training, mental training. This is where mental toughness is built. You don't build mental toughness when life feels easy. You don't build it when you feel motivated. You don't build it when someone is cheering for you. You build it when your mind wants to escape, and you choose not to. You have a choice. Every time boredom hits, you have a choice. Every time pain shows up, you have a choice. Every time resistance whispers stop, you have a choice. That's the key. Most people don't fail because they can't handle pain. They fail because they refuse to sit with discomfort long enough to become stronger. They need distraction. They need relief. They need comfort immediately. And comfort weakens them. Discomfort strengthens you. Discomfort is where your nervous system adapts. It's where your emotional control is trained. It's where your discipline becomes automatic instead of forced. Mental toughness is the ability to stay present without escape. Read that slowly. Mental toughness is the ability to stay present without escape. No phone, no food, no emotional reaction, no running away. Just you and the moment. Most people panic when nothing is happening. They feel bored and assume something is wrong. They feel discomfort and assume it's unsafe. It's not. Discomfort is not danger. It is discipline. Boredom is not punishment. It is training. Pain is not a signal to quit. It is a signal to regulate yourself. This is why silence is so powerful. Silence removes escape routes. No noise to hide behind, no validation to lean on, no stimulation to numb the discomfort. Just awareness. And awareness is uncomfortable. That's why most people avoid it. They scroll, they snack, they talk, they react, they distract. Anything to avoid sitting still with themselves. But the people who win, they don't escape. They endure. They stay. They don't ask, how do I feel? They ask, what must be done? You don't need their permission. You don't need motivation. You don't need comfort. You need tolerance. Tolerance for boredom. Tolerance for slow progress. Tolerance for emotional friction. That's the key. If you can sit in discomfort without reacting, you become dangerous in the best way. Because now, nothing controls you. Not emotion, not fatigue, not fear, not impatience. Here's what you must start doing. When discomfort appears, stop labeling it as bad. Stop calling it stress. Stop calling it anxiety. Stop calling it a problem. Call it training. Say it internally. This is training. When you feel bored during work, that's training. When your body resists exercise, that's training. When your mind wants to quit, that's training. Discomfort is not danger, it is discipline. Most people try to remove discomfort. Strong people try to master it. That's the difference. It's not about talent, it's not about intelligence, it's not about motivation. It's about how long you can stay when everything inside you wants to leave. You have a choice. Do you react or do you regulate? Do you escape or do you endure? The moment you stay is the moment you grow. This applies everywhere. When you want to check your phone, stay. When you want to quit early, stay. When you want to complain, stay silent. When you want relief, delay it. You are training your nervous system to remain calm under pressure.
That calm becomes confidence. That confidence becomes discipline. That discipline becomes identity, and identity changes behavior without effort. That's the goal. Mental toughness is not about pushing harder, it's about staying longer. Staying focused longer, staying composed longer, staying disciplined longer. The mind adapts to whatever you repeatedly expose it to. Expose it to comfort, and it becomes fragile. Expose it to discomfort, and it becomes resilient. You don't need extreme pain. You don't need punishment. You don't need suffering for the sake of suffering. You need controlled discomfort, planned discomfort, intentional discomfort. Cold showers, hard conversations, uncomfortable silence, focused work without distraction. Simple, consistent, quiet. This is how strong people are built, not in chaos, not in drama, but in repetition. Discomfort is not danger, it is discipline. Say it again. Discomfort is not danger, it is discipline. If you remember nothing else from this chapter, remember this. Your ability to stay present determines your power. If you can stay present, you can stay in control. If you can stay in control, you can stay consistent. If you stay consistent, results become inevitable. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel confident. You don't need to feel inspired. You need to stay. That's it. Stay with the discomfort. Stay with the silence. Stay with the process. This is how toughness is built when no one is watching. You've learned how to face discomfort. Now it's time to learn what happens when you stop chasing relief and start building endurance.
Chapter 6. The Discipline of Showing Up Without Applause. No one will praise you during real growth. That is not a mistake. That is the test. Most people quit not because the work is hard, but because it feels invisible. No likes, no recognition, no encouragement, no applause. And that silence makes them doubt themselves. But you have a choice. You can interpret silence as rejection, or you can recognize it as the training ground of discipline. That's the key. If you need applause to show up, you don't have discipline, you have dependency. And dependency collapses the moment the reward disappears. Real growth happens in rooms with no audience, in the mornings no one sees, in routines no one cares about. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You need consistency. Show up anyway, especially when it's quiet. The average person is addicted to feedback. They need confirmation that what they're doing matters. They need signs. They need encouragement. They need to feel seen. But discipline does not work that way. Discipline is neutral. It does not praise you. It does not motivate you. It does not care how you feel. Discipline only asks one question. Did you show up today? Not with excitement, not with confidence, not with belief. Just, did you show up? That's it. And this is where most people fail. They wait to feel inspired. They wait to feel noticed. They wait for someone to say, you're doing great. But no one is coming. And that realization is painful, but powerful. Because once you accept that no applause is coming, you stop performing. And when you stop performing, you start building. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Think about this carefully. If someone only works hard when people are watching, if someone only stays consistent when praised, if someone only shows up when rewarded, they are not strong. They are trained. Trained to respond to external signals. Remove the signal and they disappear. That's not mental toughness. That's conditioning. Mental toughness is showing up when no one would even notice if you didn't. That's the difference. And it's uncomfortable because silence exposes your true intentions. When no one is watching, you find out whether you actually care or whether you were just seeking validation. You have a choice. Quit quietly or build quietly. That's the key. Here's the truth no one tells you. The most important phase of your growth will feel pointless. You will do the work and see nothing change. You will repeat habits that feel boring. You will improve in ways that are invisible. And your mind will try to sabotage you. It will say, "This isn't working. No one cares. Why are you doing this? You should stop." That voice is not logical. That voice is a weakness looking for an excuse. And every time you listen to it, you reinforce that weakness. But every time you show up anyway, you break the pattern. Show up anyway, especially when it's quiet. Discipline is not built during exciting moments. It is built during dull ones, during repetition, during boredom, during days that feel exactly the same. That's why so few people develop it. They confuse intensity with progress. They confuse emotion with commitment. But discipline is not emotional. It is mechanical. You do the thing because it's time to do the thing. Not because you feel like it, not because you're inspired, not because anyone is watching. That's the standard. And once you internalize that standard, something changes. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop needing encouragement. You stop waiting for the right moment. You just act. That's power. Here's a practical instruction. Pick one habit, just one, something small but meaningful, and commit to doing it daily for 30 days without telling anyone. No posts, no updates, no hints, no "I'm working on something." Complete silence. This is not about secrecy. This is about independence. You are training yourself to rely on internal standards, not external reactions. You are training discipline. And at first, it will feel empty. That's normal. Your nervous system is addicted to feedback. Silence feels like withdrawal. But if you stay consistent, something happens. Your identity shifts. You stop asking, "Will anyone notice?" and start asking, "Did I do what I said I would do?" That's the transformation. Most people live on a reward-based operating system. They perform, they wait, they expect praise. But disciplined people live on a commitment-based system. They act first, they repeat, they trust the process. They understand that applause comes later or not at all. And they're fine with that, because the reward of discipline is not praise, it's control. Control over behavior, control over impulses, control over self-respect. You don't need their permission to become disciplined. You don't need their recognition to stay consistent. You only need to show up again and again and again. Understand this deeply. If you can master showing up without applause, you become dangerous, because nothing can stop you. No silence, no doubt, no lack of motivation. You move regardless. And that level of self-control compounds faster than any external reward. That's why real discipline looks boring from the outside, but from the inside, it's freedom. Freedom from validation, freedom from mood, freedom from dependence. So remember this. When no one claps, when no one comments, when no one notices, that's not a sign to stop. That's the signal to continue. Show up anyway, especially when it's quiet, because silence is not your enemy. Silence is the environment where discipline is forged. You've learned how to show up without reward. Now let's go deeper, because the next challenge is not applause, it's distraction. Chapter 7. Stop seeking emotional relief. You are not weak because you feel discomfort. You are weak when you run from it. This chapter is about one habit that silently destroys mental toughness: seeking emotional relief. Every time you feel tension, boredom, stress, or uncertainty, your mind looks for an exit, a distraction, a reward, a release. Scrolling, snacking, complaining, venting, entertainment, validation. You call it self-care, but most of the time, it's avoidance, and avoidance weakens you. You have a choice. You always have a choice. You can seek relief, or you can build control. That's the key. Comfort behaviors feel harmless, but they quietly train your mind to escape instead of endure. When something feels uncomfortable and you immediately soothe it, you send a message to your brain: this feeling is dangerous. Avoid it. That message gets repeated again and again until your tolerance shrinks. Now small things feel overwhelming. Minor stress feels unbearable. Silence feels threatening. That's not strength. That's conditioning. Relief weakens. Control strengthens. Say it again. Relief weakens. Control strengthens. Mental toughness is not about never feeling discomfort. It's about not obeying it. Discomfort is information, not instruction. It tells you something is happening. It does not tell you to escape. You don't need relief every time you feel tension. You need stability. You don't need comfort every time you feel pressure. You need control. You don't need to feel good to function well. You have a choice. Look at your daily habits. What do you reach for when things get uncomfortable? When work feels boring, do you distract? When emotions rise, do you numb? When progress feels slow, do you quit? Most people do. That's why most people stay mentally soft. They confuse relief with recovery. Recovery restores you after effort. Relief avoids effort altogether. That's the difference. Tough minds delay relief. They don't deny themselves forever. They don't punish themselves. They simply choose timing. They finish the task first. They sit with the feeling. They let the urge pass. Because urges peak and fade. They always do. If you don't act on them, they lose power. That's the key. Every time you delay relief, you train endurance. Every time you resist impulse, you strengthen control. You are teaching your nervous system, I can handle this. That belief compounds. Soon, discomfort doesn't scare you. It signals growth. Relief weakens. Control strengthens. This is not about becoming cold or emotionless. It's about becoming stable. Unstable people chase feelings. Stable people choose direction. Your emotions will rise and fall no matter what you do. Your discipline must remain steady. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need relief to continue. You have a choice. Here is the practice. The next time you feel an urge to escape, pause. Don't judge it. Don't suppress it. Just observe it. Feel it fully without acting. Name it. This is discomfort. This is boredom. This is restlessness. Then continue your task anyway. That's how control is built. Start small. Delay the phone. Finish the work. Sit in silence for 5 minutes longer than feels uncomfortable. Each moment of resistance strengthens your baseline. You're not chasing relief anymore. You're building capacity. Notice how often relief is tied to emotion. You feel anxious, so you were distracted.
You feel lonely, so you seek validation. You feel tired, so you quit early. But emotions are temporary. Your identity is not. Stop letting temporary feelings dictate permanent patterns. You have a choice. This is where mental toughness separates from motivation. Motivation seeks relief. Discipline seeks alignment. Motivation asks, how do I feel? Discipline asks, what needs to be done? That's the shift. When you stop seeking emotional relief, something powerful happens. Your mind quiets, your reactions slow, your focus sharpens. You stop being controlled by impulses. You start being guided by values. Relief weakens. Control strengthens. This is not asking you to be harsh. It's asking you to be honest. How much of your life is designed around avoiding discomfort? How many decisions are made to feel better, not be better? Awareness is the first step. From now on, when discomfort shows up, treat it as training. This is the moment. This is the rep. This is where strength is built. You don't need relief right now. You need to resolve. You have a choice. You have now learned how relief weakens discipline. You've seen how delaying comfort builds control. You've started choosing stability over impulse. But mental toughness is not just about resisting urges. It's about mastering attention. You've learned to sit with discomfort. Now you must learn where to place your focus. Because focus is power.
Chapter 8. Silence trains focus better than force. Forcing focus does not make you disciplined. It makes you tense. It makes you frustrated. And eventually, it makes you quit. You've felt this before. You sit down to work. You tell yourself, focus harder. And within minutes, your mind fights back. That's not a weakness. That's resistance. Focus does not respond to force. Focus responds to silence. That's the key. Silence removes friction. Force creates it. When you try to dominate your mind pushes back. When you quiet the noise around you, your mind naturally aligns. Less noise, more direction. That is not a slogan. That is a law. Most people think focus is about effort. It's not. It's about the environment. You are not unfocused because you are lazy. You are unfocused because you are overstimulated. Too many voices, too many inputs, too many opinions, too many notifications. Every sound demands attention. Every message fragments your thinking. Every scroll trains your brain to jump, not stay. You have a choice. You can keep forcing focus in a noisy environment, or you can remove the noise and let focus emerge naturally. You don't need their permission to disconnect. You don't need validation to protect your attention. You don't need motivation to turn things off. It's not about willpower. It's about design. Silence is not empty. Silence is structured. When noise disappears, clarity rises. When input reduces, direction sharpens. When stimulation drops, depth returns. That's why your best ideas don't come during chaos. They come in the shower. They come during walks. They come late at night when the world goes quiet. That's not a coincidence. That's silence doing its work. Less noise, more direction. Say it again. Less noise, more direction. Forcing focus is aggressive. Silence is strategic. Aggression burns energy. Strategy conserves it. Mentally tough people don't try to outwork distractions. They eliminate them. They don't fight temptation. They remove access. They don't argue with their impulses. They design their environment so impulses lose power. That's the difference. You don't need more discipline. You need fewer distractions. Here's the truth most people avoid. Your phone is not neutral. Your notifications are not harmless. Your constant connectivity is not productive. Every alert trains your brain to expect interruption. Every interruption weakens your attention span. You cannot build deep focus in a shallow environment. You have a choice. You can keep responding to every vibration, or you can decide that your mind deserves protection. You don't need their permission. Silence is a boundary, and boundaries create freedom. When you silence external noise, internal order forms. Your thoughts slow down, your priorities line up, your actions become intentional. This is not magic, this is neurological. The brain thrives on consistency, not chaos. It thrives on depth, not stimulation. It thrives on stillness. That's the key. Let's talk about how to apply this. First, remove unnecessary input. Not reduce, remove. Mute notifications that do not serve your mission. Unfollow accounts that provoke emotion without value. Turn off background noise when working. Silence is not passive, it is a deliberate act. Second, create silent blocks. Not endless hours, just protected time. 30 minutes of uninterrupted silence beats 3 hours of distracted effort. Less noise realizes more progress. Third, stop multitasking. Multitasking is not a skill, it's a distraction pattern. You have a choice: single task with presence, or fragment your attention and wonder why nothing sticks. Focus is not something you chase, it's something you allow. Force tightens the mind, silence opens it. That's why forcing discipline often leads to burnout, and quiet consistency leads to mastery. It's not about intensity, it's about alignment. Most people avoid silence because silence exposes them. In silence, there is no escape, no entertainment, no emotional distraction, just you and your thoughts. That discomfort is not dangerous, it is training. Silence builds mental toughness because it teaches you to stay present without stimulation. That's the skill. You sit, you stay, you work. No drama, no noise, no explanation. Less noise, more direction. Here's something important. Silence will feel uncomfortable at first. That's normal. Your mind has been conditioned to constant input. Removing it feels like withdrawal. But if you stay with it, something shifts. Your thinking becomes clearer, your reactions slow down, your focus strengthens. You don't need to force this shift, you just need to allow it. That's the key. Mentally tough people don't talk about focus, they protect it. They don't complain about distraction, they remove it. They don't wait for perfect conditions, they create silent ones. You don't need their permission. Silence is not weakness, silence is control. Control over your attention, control over your energy, control over your direction. And direction beats motivation every time. If you want to build real mental toughness, stop trying to outwork your distractions. Instead, quiet your world. Turn down the noise, limit the inputs, protect your attention. Let silence do the training. Less noise, more direction. You've learned how silence sharpens focus. You've learned that force creates resistance. You've learned that clarity comes from removal, not addition. Now you're ready for the next truth, because focus means nothing if you are driven by external approval. You mastered silence. Now it's time to master independence.
Chapter 9. Become internally driven. External motivation collapses under pressure. That's the truth most people don't want to hear. They want inspiration. They want hype. They want someone to push them when they don't feel like moving. But pressure does not respond to motivation. Pressure exposes it. When life tightens, motivation disappears. When results are slow, motivation fades. When no one is watching, motivation dies. That's the difference between the average and the unbreakable. Internally driven people do not rely on feelings, they rely on standards. You have a choice. You can wait until you feel ready, or you can move because you decided to move. That's the key. Most people confuse motivation with discipline. They think motivation teaches discipline. It doesn't. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. Motivation asks, "How do I feel today?" Discipline says, "What must be done, regardless?" You don't need their permission. You don't need encouragement. You don't need the right mood.
Discipline does not wait for emotion. That phrase must live in your mind. Repeat it. Discipline does not wait for emotion. Because emotion is unstable. Emotion changes hourly. Emotion collapses under stress. If your progress depends on how you feel, you will stop the moment discomfort appears. Internally driven people understand something simple. Feelings are weather. Standards are structured. Weather changes. Structure remains. You have a choice. Build your life around feelings or build your life around decisions. That's the dividing line. Internally driven people move even when they feel nothing. No excitement, no passion, no spark, just execution. They don't negotiate with resistance. They don't analyze boredom. They don't wait for inspiration. They act because action is who they are. That's the key. Let's be clear about something uncomfortable. Waiting to feel motivated is a form of avoidance. It feels reasonable. It sounds intelligent, but it keeps you weak. You tell yourself, I'll start when I feel ready. You tell yourself, I'm just not in the right headspace. That's not self-awareness. That's emotional dependency. You have trained yourself to obey your moods, and moods are terrible leaders. You don't need their permission. You don't need validation from how you feel. You decide. Then you execute. Discipline does not wait for emotion. Internally driven people operate on non-negotiables. They don't ask, should I? They ask, when? They don't ask, do I feel like it? They ask, what's next? That shift changes everything. Because once action becomes automatic, progress becomes inevitable. Here's what internally driven behavior looks like in real life. You wake up tired, you execute anyway. You feel unmotivated, you execute anyway. You feel discouraged, you execute anyway. Not recklessly, not emotionally, but deliberately. That's the difference. This is not about forcing yourself emotionally. It's about removing emotion from the decision-making process entirely. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency. You have a choice. Attach your actions to how you feel, or attach them to who you've decided to become. That's the key. Internally driven people don't wait for confidence. Confidence is built after action, not before it. They don't wait to believe. Belief follows evidence, and evidence comes from repetition. One action, then another, quietly, without drama, without announcement. Discipline does not wait for emotion. Say it again. Discipline does not wait for emotion. This is where most people fail, not because they lack ability, but because they demand emotional comfort before progress. They want reassurance, they want certainty, they want guarantees. Internally driven people accept uncertainty. They move anyway. They don't need to feel good to do good work. They don't need clarity to begin. They begin and clarity follows. That's the key. Now let's talk about pressure. Pressure reveals what you are driven by. When pressure rises, externally motivated people stall, they freeze, they look for encouragement. Internally driven people narrow their focus, they simplify, they execute the next small task. They don't rise to the occasion, they fall back on their systems. That's why they last. If you want to build this, you must train it deliberately. Here's how. First, remove decision-making from routine actions. Decide once, then automate. You don't decide every day to show up. You decide who you are and let behavior follow. Second, stop consuming motivation as entertainment. Motivation should be a tool, not a dependency. If you need hype to act, you're not disciplined yet. Third, practice acting when you feel neutral. Not excited, not angry, neutral. That's real training. Anyone can act when emotions are high. Only the disciplined act when emotions are absent. You have a choice. Train emotional obedience or train internal commands. That's the key. Internally driven people speak to themselves differently. They don't say, I don't feel like it. They say, this is part of the process.
They don't dramatize effort, they normalize it. Work is not a mood, it's a requirement. Discipline does not wait for emotion. Let that sink in. If you internalize this, everything changes. Your energy stabilizes, your focus sharpens, your identity solidifies. You stop chasing feelings, you start honoring commitments, and slowly, quietly, you become someone reliable. Not impressive, reliable. And reliability beats intensity every time. This chapter is not about being harsh, it's about being free. Free from mood swings, free from hesitation, free from waiting. You don't need their permission. You don't need excitement. You need alignment. Alignment between decision and action. That's the key. Remember this as we move forward. Mental toughness is not built by force. It's built by consistency. You've learned to move without emotion. Now you're ready for the next layer. Because once you stop needing motivation, you start protecting something more valuable, your focus. And that brings us to the next chapter. You mastered acting without feeling. Now let's talk about guarding the one thing discipline cannot survive without.
Chapter 10. Let your life make the noise. Results speak louder than personality. Power is felt, not announced. And this is where everything comes together. Most people try to sound impressive. Strong people let their lives do the talking. You see, noise is cheap. Words are easy. Announcements cost nothing. Anyone can talk about discipline. Anyone can talk about plans. Anyone can talk about who they are becoming. But results? Results are expensive. They cost time. They cost discomfort. They cost silence. And that's why results carry weight. Here's the truth most people avoid. Talking is often a substitute for doing. When you speak too much, you leak energy. When you explain too much, you dilute authority. When you announce too early, you sabotage momentum. You have a choice. You can be loud and empty, or quiet and effective. That's the key. Strong people do not chase attention. They build substance, and attention follows. Weak people chase recognition. They want to be seen before they're ready. They want credit before they've earned it. You don't need their permission. You don't need their validation. And you definitely don't need their applause. When you stop talking, people start noticing. This chapter is not about becoming invisible. It's about becoming undeniable. There is a difference. Invisible people avoid responsibility. Undeniable people accept pressure without complaint. Invisible people hide. Undeniable people work quietly until results force recognition. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to defend your process. You don't need to explain your growth. Your behavior will do that for you. Think about the people you respect most. Not the loudest, not the most charismatic, not the ones always posting and speaking. It's the ones who show up consistently, who remains calm under pressure, who move with purpose and restraint. They don't advertise discipline, they embody it. And that embodiment is what creates gravity. People feel it. They may not understand it, but they sense it. Power is felt, not announced. This is where mental toughness reaches maturity. Not when you feel confident, but when you no longer need to look confident. Not when you win once, but when winning becomes normal and unremarkable. Not when people praise you, but when praise becomes irrelevant. That's the shift. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you still feel the need to talk about your progress, you haven't arrived yet. That's not an insult, that's information. Because real progress quiets the ego. It doesn't inflate it. When you are actually growing, you become more selective with words, more measured, more deliberate. You don't rush to share. You don't rush to prove. You don't rush to be understood. You trust the process because you are the process. You have a choice.
You can keep explaining who you are, or you can build a life that explains it for you. That's the key. Now, let's talk about behavior, because transformation happens through action, not theory. First, stop announcing your plans. If you feel the urge to tell someone what you're about to do, pause. That urge is emotional relief, not discipline. Silence creates tension, and tension fuels action. When you don't talk about it, you have to do it to release the pressure. That's why silence sharpens execution. Second, reduce unnecessary expression. Not every thought needs to be shared. Not every feeling needs to be processed publicly. Not every win needs to be posted. This isn't suppression, this is control. You are training emotional discipline. You are choosing containment over chaos. When you stop talking, people start noticing. Third, let consistency replace charisma. Charisma fades, consistency compounds. Charisma gets attention once, consistency builds reputation. Show up the same way every day. Not dramatic, not emotional, just reliable. Reliability is intimidating to unstable people. Fourth, stop defending yourself. Defense signals insecurity. Confidence remains still. If someone misunderstands you, let them. If someone doubts you, let them. If someone underestimates you, let them. Your job is not to correct perception. Your job is to produce results. Perception always catches up to reality. That's the key. And here's the part most people struggle with. Silence feels uncomfortable at first, because silence removes distraction. It removes performance. It removes identity reinforcement. In silence, you are alone with your discipline, with your habits, with your effort. No audience, no feedback, no reassurance. And that's exactly why silence builds toughness. Because you learn to operate without external fuel. You learn to move when no one is watching. You learn to persist without praise. You learn to stay calm without validation. That's mental independence. That's power. When your life makes noise, you don't need to. People will ask. People will notice. People will feel the difference. And you won't rush to explain it, because you'll know something they don't understand yet. The strongest signal is restraint. Let your actions be precise. Let your habits be visible. Let your consistency be undeniable. Say less, do more. And remember this phrase. Use it as a checkpoint. When you stop talking, people start noticing. If they're not noticing yet, that's okay. It means you're still building, and building happens quietly. This is the final discipline, the discipline of letting go of performance, the discipline of trusting time, the discipline of allowing results to speak. You don't need to rush the reveal. You don't need to force recognition. Keep showing up. Keep staying silent. Keep choosing control over comfort. Because power does not announce itself. It arrives. And when it does, it doesn't need words. You've mastered emotional control. You've learned mental toughness. Now, let your life carry the message. This audiobook ends here, but the work continues, quietly. When you stop talking, people start noticing.
Mental toughness is not something you declare. It is something you practice, quietly, daily, without witnesses. The world rewards noise, but strength is built in silence. The calm mind wins. The controlled mind lasts. Stop reacting. Stop explaining. Stop waiting to be noticed. Do the work when it feels boring. Stay silent when emotion rises. Show up when motivation disappears. This is your challenge. For the next 30 days, say less, react less, and work more. Let discipline replace emotion. Let silence replace noise. And let your strength speak for itself.